A while ago, I was reading in my Bible in 1 Kings chapter 2, and something really struck me, and it was this. It says, as the time of King David's death approached, he gave this charge to his son Solomon. He said, I am going where everyone on earth must someday go. Now that really struck me when I read it. It's like, and whenever you're reading the Bible and something strikes you, you should stop. God's trying to show you something. So I'm like, And so I journaled about it. This was a couple of years ago. I am going where everyone on earth must someday go. And I wrote, we're all going there. We just don't think about it in America. And the result of that is we're surprised when it happens. Oh my goodness, someone died. It's like somehow that's a shock. We're all going there. And then the second thing I wrote is, and the result of that is because we don't think about that we're going there and there is forever, we live very materialistic lives here on earth. Because we lose sight of the fact this isn't home. We don't stay here. We don't stay here. The short time we have on earth is very short. It ends abruptly at any moment. You never know. And then eternity begins. Eternity, a time that will never end. And yet we focus so much on the here and now, and so instead of even thinking about eternity, and yet we get constant reminders that eternity is coming for all of us. You are going to have a moment of eternity, a moment where you stop living in time and you enter into eternity. And in this last year, so many people entered into their moment of eternity. I don't know this young man's name. He's 26 years old. He was a rapper, and his moment of eternity came this last year. 26 years old. Some of you recognize her right away. Her moment of eternity just happened not that long ago, right? Just a moment ago, she was living here in this world, and now she's in the world that comes afterwards. That one's eternal. This one isn't. Kate Spade, her moment of eternity came this last year. Living life, everything's going. It's all about here now, and then all of a sudden into eternity she goes. Any of you fans of his? Some of you can't help but think of him in his younger years than these years. But he went into eternity this year, didn't he? And then Stephen Hawking, the famous physicist and outspoken atheist, entered into eternity this year. Now, obviously, when I look at pictures like this, they're intended to be reminders for us that we don't stay here. This isn't home. And I obviously wonder what their moment of transition was like. When you go from being here in this temporary holding place into eternity, how did they feel? Were they excited about the decisions they made? Were they happy? Did they regret them? No way to know. But this is what God asks us to think about. One of my favorite authors, John Ortberg, put it this way. He said, wise people build their lives around what is eternal, and then they squeeze in what is temporary, not the other way around. Isn't that true? You're going to be there forever. So doesn't it make sense that you think about eternity? It's just not what we do, though. And so we've been doing this series designed to do that. In the Bible, it says we're supposed to set our minds on things above, not on things below. We're supposed to set our mind on what is to come and think about that. We just don't do it because your lives are so busy and you have so many problems and you have so many challenges. And so they take our attention off of what we're doing in this series and put it back on the here and now, and we live for the here and now. And so we've been saying in this whole series, my life on earth is all about preparing for eternity. This is the warm-up before the game. That's all this is. And we've emphasized three different things so far as we've been going through this. First, we have to remember this world is not our home. In the New Testament, it says your body is a tent. That's what your body is. And some of you are like, yeah, you feel your tent wearing out because you have a tent. And your tent has holes in it now, and it's worn, and it's got patches, and sometimes the patches leak. And this is our body, right? It's a tent, and it's wearing out. This isn't home. And that means where we live right now, where you're going to go after this service is over, that's just the temporary campground. It's just a campground site. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We said, how foolish would it be for you to put up your tent and then begin to landscape around your tent? Would you ever do that at a campsite? Of course not. You're not staying. You're not staying. And so that's the focus in the Bible. It's like, you got to remember, this is true about you. This is a tent. This isn't home. You're just here temporarily. So don't make the temporary your focus. You got to fight this. This world isn't our home. The next one is going to be our home. We're going to be there forever. And then it says, so while we're here, we need to do the will of God, because what matters in heaven is your kingdom come, your will be done on earth, just like it's done every day in heaven. So our job now is to do the will of God here, because we're going to do it there. So we talked about that, how important it is to begin to do what God wants you to do now, because you're going to do it there. And then the third thing we talked about last week is Jesus said, you would be really, really wise to give everything you can away to store up treasure in heaven, because do you know what percentage of Burt Reynolds' stuff he left behind when he died? 100%. Every single dollar in his checking account, every possession in his house, every vehicle in his garage is still here. And the same is true for all of us. And Jesus said, but you don't have to just accumulate stuff here in this tiny little time. You can send it ahead, and you do that by giving it away. When you give out of love, you transfer it into eternity. So if you're going to think about eternity and prepare for eternity, then you got to do these things. But that's not all. I told you last week when I started, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to break this message into two. And so this is part 2 of last week when we were talking about, because we're talking about how you can build for eternity. Because the reality is you can build here. My goodness, you can build here. There are people who build massive mansions and have massive savings accounts and massive everything here on earth. They can build for the earth. Whoop-de-doo-da-day. Then they die. The founder of IKEA died this last year. Do you want to know what percentage of his billions he left behind? 100%. 100%. You don't live for this. You live for that, because that's eternity. That's going to last forever. So we're going to continue this message. I want to ask you to open up your program. Take out the notes that you'll find inside. If you haven't done that already, grab a pen. Welcome to those of you who are watching on YouTube. We're so glad you've tuned in. In the comments section are these notes. If you want to open them up and grab a pen, this is so important that you consider this today. And I know it's really hard, but it's really important. So let's talk about the second thing that God would say, Jesus would say, if you're going to really begin to build for eternity, the next thing he'd say is you really need to make serving your focus. And you need to value serving over selfishness. And you have this choice every single day. Value serving over selfishness. Every day in front of you, you have 2 paths you pick. Every day. Every day. I don't know if I've ever told this story. I can't remember. I'm just old enough now and taught so many years, I can't remember what stories I've told you. So if I've already told this one, forgive me. But one of my favorite stories on this was when I was 18 years old. So 1988, I was a freshman in college in the Twin Cities, Northwestern College. The Twin Cities are cold in the wintertime. We think it's cold down here. Drive 4 hours north, and it makes a difference. And it was bitter cold. And I'm a freshman in college, and unfortunately, I have no money. Zilch. This very expensive school, barely pay for everything I have. Matter of fact, on the weekend, they didn't serve meals. I literally, on Saturday, would eat 1 can of SpaghettiOs. That was my meal for the day. I just had nothing. So one of the things I had brought from home was the only pair of gloves I owned. Oh, boy. They were thick, light brown, padded gloves. They were great for warmth. And they had this plastic lining on the front side. They looked like clown gloves. Like big clown gloves. Oh, I'm Bozo the Clown. Huh? It's like, do you know how uncool I was? It's like, here I am, I'm a freshman in college, trying to get someone to date me. I'm wearing Bozo the Clown gloves. Yeah. So I hated them. But you don't really have an option. You live in the Twin Cities in the wintertime. You're wearing something, because you are losing limbs. It's like, okay, so I wore these Bozo the Clown. I'd put my hands in my pockets with my Bozo because I was so embarrassed from them. And then in January, somewhere like January that year, my mom sent me $20 in a letter. It's like, oh, awesome. I didn't buy food. I went to the store and bought brand new, cool, black leather gloves. It's like, now I don't need to be embarrassed anymore. Bozo the Clown gloves are gone. This is awesome. And so I hadn't worn those gloves, I don't even think, 1 week. And we were out driving with some of my friends. We were in the Twin Cities. And if you know anything about the Twin Cities, you were talking about a major city, and there was a lot of poverty. And one day we pulled up at this corner and looked out the window, and it was bitter cold. And there was a lot of homelessness in the Twin Cities, and we were in an area where there was a lot of it. And there was a guy literally sitting on the ground, wrapped in his coat, and his belongings were all next to him, and he had no gloves on at all. And as I looked out the car window and saw him as we stopped at the light, immediately I had this prompting from God saying, take off your new gloves and go give them to him. And I'm like, that's not God. That is not a prompting from God. That's the devil. It was not God. And I had this debate in my head. It's like, no, I just got them. The only thing I got left are the brown ones. If I had the brown ones, I'd give them right away. You know I would. I'd give them right away. And I had this debate in my head for about 20 seconds because the light was going to change, and I knew I had to do it. And so I said to my friend, pull over. And I got out of the car, and I walked over, and I took off my brand new, cool leather gloves and gave them to this homeless guy sitting on the side of the road who had no gloves, and got back in the car and felt unbelievable joy. That was 30 years ago. I can't tell you one thing anyone gave me in 1988, other than that $20 bill. But I can tell you how I felt 30 years ago when I got back in the car. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because you've had those moments where you had the opportunity to give, and God prompted you, and you did it. And you felt something in that moment that changed you. The Bible's so clear on this. Here are your two paths, Galatians 5:13. You, my brothers, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge a sinful nature. Rather, serve one another in love. So he said, here's your two paths. Now, in Jesus Christ, you have a future that is incredible. You get to choose. So here you go. Path number one is the sinful nature. You can be selfish as you want to be and call yourself a follower of Jesus. You can. He won't stop you from doing that. And then the second path you can choose in front of you every single day is serve one another out of love path. Every morning you wake up, you got both paths right in front of you. Am I going to make it about me today? My selfish nature, my sinful nature is just going to be about me, me, me? You live in a world that will say, this is the path you should be on, right? Every day. Every commercial says it's about you, right? Every commercial says, I don't have that on. I'll get to it later, apparently. So every day you have this choice. And the Bible just begs you to choose to serve one another in love path. And this is why. Because he says, here's what will happen if you choose this. Serving will build your faith. Because you get to watch God use you to change another human being's life when you serve him. When you see the God of the universe work through you to help somebody else, impact somebody else, you got no high that will compare to that. There isn't a drug you can take in this world that will create a high like that. You find meaning and purpose in your life. Your characters are refined, especially when it doesn't go well, or especially when he asks you to take off your new gloves. Your character is really refined in those moments, and your heart is changed 30 years later. 30 years later, I can still tell you how it felt in that moment. And the reason is this, as one author said, God wired the universe so that happiness does not come from status, salary, sex, or success. Happiness comes from service, and God designed you to be happiest when you're giving your life away. Why? Because he gave his life away. And he wants you to be like him, and it's all about love, and you cannot say you love people and not serve them. Cannot do it. Cannot do it. And he says, this is the key to the good life. You want to see how clear he is? Look at this. Jesus said this. If you insist on saving your life, you will lose it. You choose this path, the selfish path, you lose it. Only those who throw away their lives for my sake and for the sake of the good news will ever know what it means to really live. You get it? Every day you got two paths right in front of you. The selfish path, which the world says this is the key to the great life. Let me ask you this. How many truly selfish people do you know who are filled with joy? Do you know any? I don't. They are the most miserable people I know. The selfish path is destructive. It's the servants in the world who get to experience the joy that God intended you to experience. Do you know that? Do you know that? So it says, here's the two paths every single day you choose. And if you really want to begin to build for eternity, you've got to understand that the serving path is the key to the life that you want, not the selfish path. Now, once you get that clear in your mind, okay, I got these two choices. I'm going to make the choice to do the serving path. The second thing you got to do is now you got to have the right attitude. Once you start on this path, now you're going to have to develop the right attitude. Have you ever read the book, The Purpose-Driven Life? If you've never read this book and you're like, I'm not much of a reader, read one book. Read this book. It's one of my favorite books. Best-selling author Rick Warren wrote it years ago. It has impacted so many people, and the opening lines are hilarious. The opening line of the book is, "It's not about you." Who writes a best-selling book and the opening line is, "It's not about you"? Because every other thing says, no, it is about you. You need this. You deserve this. And he's like, yeah, it's really not about you. It's crazy. And yet, that's exactly right. Now, the world tells you this. This is that slide I thought was coming earlier. So the world tells you this. It is about you. It's about your happiness. It's about you having more and having bigger and better and having all of your desires. This is what it's about. And everyone who follows that path, the path of selfishness, they end up miserable. They end up with a lot of stuff. Who cares? That they will 100% leave behind when their time of eternity comes. It's just a dead-end road. So Jesus, knowing this, when he was here, said this: "The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many." Now, many of you have heard that verse before, and in the repetition of it, we lose the mystery of that verse. When Jesus spoke these words 2,000 years ago, standing by his disciples, he was teaching them, you need to be servants. And he's saying, look at me, I didn't come to be served, I came to serve. The angels in heaven, when they heard those words come out of Jesus, those words come out of his mouth, were just like, this makes no sense. Because the reality is what Jesus should have been saying is, I have come to be served. That's what he should have said. Because of who he was. Jesus wasn't just a really nice guy, a good teacher, an old man in a rocking chair. He was God among us. He was God the Son who had come into the world 2,000 years ago. Do you know that in the book of Colossians it says that he, Jesus, is the one who created everything you see? When you get out here and drive home, you see all the hills and valleys and trees and everything. When you look up and see the clouds and the sun, you see everything, and everything you can see he made. And it says in the book of Colossians, he sustains it all by his power. The Creator was walking among us 2,000 years ago. He should have been saying, I'm here to be served. And it would have been completely appropriate. And here's the Creator standing among us saying, I didn't come to be served. I came to serve all of you. And the angels were like, oh my goodness, this makes no sense. What in the world? And that's the truth. The Creator came to serve all of us because he knew there was no other way for us to be rescued. And then he says, and so here's your life. It should be just like mine. And this is your new mantra. It's not about me. Because that's the mantra Jesus lived by. Because if it would have been about him, he never would have come. But it wasn't about him. It was about what we needed as fallen humanity. It was about us. And he said, now here's your new mantra. It's not about me anymore. He went on to say, he said, I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. So as I've served you, now you serve others. This is your future. This is what it means to follow Jesus. We become servants in this world. And so there's 4 levels you can live at. And I want to ask you to really think about this. First off, I want to ask you, what level did Jesus live his life at? Obviously, if you know anything about Jesus, you know how he lived his life. You know he lived at that bottom level. He lived as a servant in this world. He healed people, and he cared for people, and he taught people, and he was compassionate towards people. I mean, he'd serve. It was his life. He was a servant in this world. That's why he had such tremendous impact. Now, the next question, of course, is what level do you live at? I'd like to say that I live toward the bottom of that list. I don't know how true that is. The real test of it is on your notes, and it's this. You want to know where you're at? Ask yourself, how do I respond when people treat me like a servant? That's the truest test. When nobody says thank you for what you've done. When they just kind of expect you to keep doing it. When they take you for granted. What comes out of your heart? Now you're really being tested. See, a servant, if you live at that level, they just serve. They're not serving for the thanks. They're not serving for anything else. They're just serving because it's the right thing to do, and out of love they serve. Jesus served and served and served, and so many times he was never thanked at all. That's a servant. So really a servant. And the reason why this is so important is because the reality is if you're going to follow Jesus and have the adventure he wants you to have, then the reality is you're going to be treated like a servant, and it's going to be really, really hard, and you're going to have to make that decision about what you're going to do in those times when things get really hard. And you want to understand this, take a look at this couple. Domingo and Irene, I don't know their last names. They have in their lifetime been foster parents for 32 children, and they've adopted 16 of them. This is their family currently. 11 children that they've adopted, the ones that live with them right now. And the reason they do it is because in the Bible, in James chapter 1, verse 27, God commands us to care for widows and orphans. And they can't live in a world where 500,000 children every day in America have no mom or no dad. They won't live in that world. They're in their upper 50s, and in the article, all they could talk about is how they wish they could take even more children in. Now, talk about servants. I mean, you're volunteering to be a parent, and that's a lot of serving, right? That's a lot of serving. And that's, they said, sometimes, it's joy, sometimes it's just perseverance. Every parent knows that. Sometimes it's perseverance. And one time, they came home and one of their sons had hung himself in the closet. So if you think it's all roses for them and everything worked out perfectly for them, oh no, and yet they continue to serve and they continue to serve. And because they do, and this is what I want you to get, because they do, they get to experience God. One time, a family that size, how do you house them all? And they knew that in order to take in more kids, they needed to add on to their house. Well, he's a mechanic, she's a hairdresser. Not white-collar jobs that don't have resources to pull on. And it is extremely expensive to raise children in America today. So they just began to pray, God, would you expand our house for us? And they just started trusting God. One day she was praying, and she finished praying. She looked out the window, and there went by a construction vehicle. And on the side of the construction vehicle was, they always have their signs advertising Sanson, Swenson's Construction, whatever this name was. She doesn't say in the article what the name of it was, but she looked out the window. She's like, oh God, is that how you're going to provide? Is that how you're going to do it? Well, she didn't know. She just saw it after she was done praying. Well, a couple of days later, a leader in their church heard about their need to keep expanding so they could have more kids in their home. And so the leader approached them and said, you go ahead and tell me what you need, and I'll write the check. I'll pay for all of it. And you just build this thing as big as you need it. You just build as much as you need to be able to house the kids that you feel like God's asking you to take in. And so the day came when the checks were written and the construction guy pulls into the driveway. Guess what truck pulled into that driveway? Yeah. And some of you are like, well, that's just a coincidence. And what we always say, when people pray, coincidences happen. Over and over and over again. Now, here's the thing. The world looks at them and says, you're fools. You're in your upper 50s. Do you know how much money you could have for retirement? You know how much stuff you could have if you weren't spending on all these kids? But the reality is their moment of eternity is coming. And when they transition into eternity, how much regret do you think they'll have for the life they've lived? Not an ounce. Zero. They will spend eternity grateful for the choices they've made. Do you get it? Life is about preparing for eternity. You make decisions based on eternity. And if you're going to do that, you have to become a servant. So, back to those levels. Where are you at? What's your attitude today? Some of you can't remember the last time you even noticed anyone in need around you. You went this entire week and didn't even think about the needs of any other person around you. Not one moment. You thought a lot about what you need, but you didn't think at all about the needs of the people around you. Servants are focused on the needs of the people around them. And they serve even when their spouse doesn't say thank you, and their kids don't say thank you, and their coworkers don't say thank you. They're just servants who serve, like Jesus. So here's our decisions every day. I got two paths, selfishness or servanthood. If you choose the servanthood path, you have to become a servant because people will treat you like servants, right? They will. So you choose that path. The third thing that the Bible would say about that is this: you watch out for your holy discontent. You want to really build for eternity? Pay attention to this one. Build for eternity by watching out for your holy discontent. One of my favorite things to talk about. Watch out for your holy discontent. So the reality is, in case you don't know this, is you are not here by accident. God didn't look down and say, oh my goodness, how'd Brian get there? I didn't know he was coming into the world. Oh my goodness. Man, totally surprised me. He didn't say that about you. When he formed you in your mother's womb, the Bible says he formed you with a purpose in mind. There is work that he wants to partner with you in this world to accomplish. Did you know that? You are not an accident. The world may have viewed you as an accident. Your parents may have viewed you as an accident. God didn't. You are exactly the person he meant to create and to bring into this world. And he wants to partner with you to make an impact in this world. And part of the biggest thing to clue is like, okay, well, what is that? What do I do? How do I figure that out? Well, one of the most important things is pay attention to your holy discontent. All of these notes that I'm going to show you are on the back of your program, but take a look at this. Your holy discontent is something that creates a righteous anger inside of you. It's like, oh, this can't be okay. It's a burning inside you that spurs us to action. It could be any issue in this world: homelessness, starvation, education, injustice, sex slave industry, or 500,000 children that woke up this morning and don't have a mom or a dad. Right? Like Domingo and Irene. They won't live in a world where that's okay. That's a holy discontent. It's like, fine, if we have to build on, if we have to shoulder the responsibility for caring for 32 children, we sign us up. We won't live in a world where that's okay. That's a holy discontent. Does that make sense? It's like, I can't live in the world right now as it is in this area. And all of us have different ones. All of us have different focuses. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. To discover it, here are some clues on the back of your notes. Clue number one: your holy discontent will most likely come from the place where you hurt the most or where you have been hurt the most. Did you know that? I read the story about this woman who's involved in helping with child abuse in America. You know why? She was abused as a child. How could God ever use something horrific like child abuse in a positive way? Our God redeems everything. The worst thing you've ever been through, our God redeems it. Some of you only look at it as bad. You've never once said, God, is there any way you can use this awful pain from my past to help somebody else? Where are you in pain? Where have you been in pain? That's often going to be the area where God uses you. Second, your holy discontent will have nothing to do with you. It will have everything to do with serving others. And then third, it only takes what you already have to make a difference. This is the coolest thing. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be super educated. You just got to be willing. And God says, I've already given you everything you need to make a difference right now, to make a difference. One of my favorite stories about this, it's a true story about a man who was a professional chef at a high-end steak restaurant that he and his business partners had opened in California. This was a very expensive place, and it was just rolling in money. People lined up to come to this place. He was the head chef. Everything was going great. They were making so much money hand over fist. Today, that man, his name is Thomas, doesn't work at that restaurant that he helped start. The reason is because every day on his way to his restaurant, he drove by this. Every day. Every day in this big city, he saw homeless person after homeless person after homeless person, and it broke his heart. It broke it to the point where he's like, enough. I cannot live in all this luxury with all of this stuff and in a world where these people live on the streets every day and they can't even afford to live. I won't live in a world like that. So he quit his job to work at a soup kitchen as a professional chef to make amazing food for the poorest of the poor in our country. But that's not all. He said, what do I have in my hands that I can really offer these people? It's more than just cooking meals for them. He said, I know how to cook. And so he began a mentoring program with people who were homeless, where he would recruit them, take them into the kitchen, and train them how to be chefs at professional restaurants, high-end restaurants. And over and over and over again, he has watched as young man after young man after young man has turned his life around and got into a job that pays him a really good money, and they're free from addiction, and they've got a future now that they didn't have before he quit his job to go work in a soup kitchen. Now, the world says that guy is a fool, right? He could own a second house by now. He could have bought a third car. What a fool. But that chef's moment of eternity is coming. How much regret will he have the day he steps into eternity for the choices he made? He won't regret it at all, will he? What is it that God is asking you to get involved in? What cause? Some of you have no idea. Some of you know. Some of you don't really know. And all I'm asking you to do is, would you just begin to pray and say, God, where's the area where you want to use me to make a difference in this world? Just pray that. He's going to sit there and go, you got it. You pray that prayer. You know what he's going to do? He's going to put needs in front of you. Some of you are like, I don't want to see that. Yeah, you'll have to see it. It's the only way. And then you'll have that choice. Do I serve myself or do I serve them? And then you'll have another choice. Do I really become a servant like Jesus did, or just serve when it's convenient? You got a lot of choices ahead of you. So why would you even consider all this? The most important thing I'm going to say to you today is this. You have to remember that God takes your serving personally. You have to remember this. God takes your acts of service personally. If you come to Peniel here, you will hear us constantly telling you about serving opportunities. We're going to be helping out with feeding friends at the Dodgeville United Methodist Church on December 5th. So we're going to go and serve these people and we're going to feed them, and some of them may not say thank you, and some of them may be rude, and some of them, who knows? And we're going to serve them. We're just going to serve them out of love, right? That's all we're going to do. And if you come here, you're going to hear us talk about Operation Shoebox, which we just sent off all of these shoeboxes to all these kids around the globe. And you're going to hear us talk about Feed My Starving Children and how you can raise money to help feed starving kids. And you'll hear us talk about Free the Girls, which is this wonderful organization where they set up businesses for women trapped in the sex slave industry. And we will ask you to buy bras to be able to help set these businesses up. Men or women, we don't care. You buy them. And we're going to give you lots and lots of serving opportunities here. And what you need to understand is just how significant each one of these opportunities are. Because we just lose sight of this. Because here's what Jesus said, some of the most significant words in the Bible. Jesus said, when your moment of eternity comes, and it's coming for all of us. Some of you are you're going to be here one moment, take a breath, and in eternity the next moment. And then you will stand in front of the King, Jesus said. God the Father sitting on his throne. In perfect light and beauty and holiness. And we will fall before him and he will say, oh my goodness, you're here. I have waited so long for you to get here. I'm so excited you're here. Because, man, I was sure hungry that day, and you gave me that food. I was so thirsty that day, and you gave me that drink, and I had no clothes, and you put clothes on my back, and I had no shelter, and you gave me shelter. And Jesus said, we will say to him, God, when did we ever see you like this and do this to you? And here's what Jesus said. And the King will say, I tell you the truth, what you did to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me. What you did to the least of my brothers and sisters, you were doing for me. Oh, that day I had no shoes, and you took your shoes off and gave them to me. Thank you so much for that. And it doesn't have to be huge. Jesus makes it clear, if you give even a cup of cold water to the least of my followers, you will surely be rewarded. Because God takes every act of service you do personally. One of my favorite serving stories of all time is a friend of mine. She's a grandma. She used to drive a taxi. And one day she got a call to go to this school and pick up this girl. So she pulled up in front of the school, and the girl was being escorted out by the school police officer. Not a good situation. And she had a T-shirt on in support of a young boy in the community who had been killed recently. And there was going to be a rally that day for this boy. And so she had obviously been crying, and my friend saw when she got in the car, she was obviously really upset. And so my friend said, I asked her, are you going to be okay? And the girl said, I don't know. She said, I just want to go home. So my friend, as she was driving home, said, are you going to get to go to the rally today? And she said, not now. And my friend said this, I said a quick prayer for this girl, and I stated that I was clueless on what it was like to be a teenager now. But what I was sure of was that she was a child of God, as was this boy who had died. When they pulled up in front of the house, the girl went inside to get some money to pay her cab fare. And when she came back to the van window, my friend said, I asked her if I could say a quick prayer for her. She said, I don't remember my specific words. I just know that when I was done, this girl said thank you. And about a week later, the taxi cab service got a note. It said, to the older lady that brought me home last week, I want to say thank you. That day was the worst day of my life. My mom wouldn't allow me to go to the rally. We had a big fight before school. I was sent to the principal's office for hollering in class. I was so mad I almost spit on my teacher. I just wanted to go home and end it all. Your driver talked to me all the way home. It made me feel like I wanted to keep on living. I hope she doesn't get in trouble, but she hugged me and prayed and told me that God and Jesus love me no matter what. I forget her name. She's white. She's a grandma. It was in the morning. My friend said, Brian, I've had many opportunities to help many people as an EMT for years, but nothing has ever had such a huge impact as that note. Oh, she has no idea. Because the day is going to come where her moment of eternity is going to take place. And she will step into the presence of the King of the universe, and he'll say, oh my goodness, I've been waiting so long for you, because that day I was so discouraged and felt so hopeless, and your hug and prayer meant so much to me. And she'll say, when did I ever hug and pray for you? And the King will say to her, what you did for that girl that day, you did to me. Do you get it? You see why this is so significant? You see why this is worth giving your life to? Some of you say that you are followers of Jesus. Let me ask you this. If you say that you follow Jesus today, when was the last time you felt pure joy? Or you experienced God's power in an amazing way? Or anything supernatural at all? Some of you have no stories that come to mind. You can't remember the last time you felt that way. You can't remember the last time you experienced God's power doing something cool in your life. And the reason is this, right here. If you choose at the beginning the selfish path, you think God's going to give you full joy down that path? You think he's going to give you his incredible power to change this world down the selfish path? Why? So you can build bigger monuments to yourself? It's a dead-end path. You cannot know supernatural joy and power and peace and the life that God has for you until you make the different decision to go down the path that says, I'm a servant. And each morning when you wake up to say, God, who do you want me to serve for you today? And to keep serving when they treat you like a servant. Remembering that someday your reward is coming. Not here. Your reward is coming there. Some of you, this is why your spiritual life just doesn't mean much to you. Why following Jesus just doesn't mean much to you. You won't really know him and what he's offering you till you become a servant. That's when you will experience him. So start serving. Start serving anywhere. You can't possibly know what you're going to start serving. Someday you're going to serve in an area where like, oh my goodness, this makes me feel something I've never felt before. Yeah, you're not going to know that till you start serving. For some of you, when we go and help with feeding friends, that's going to be it for you. You're going to see something, you're going to experience something, and it's me like, oh my goodness, I need to volunteer every Wednesday night here. It's going to happen when you're there. For some of you, it'll be in some other serving opportunity we're going to give you in the next year where all of a sudden you're going to encounter something. It's like, this is it. I may not know what fully it's about, but I know it's about this, and I'm going to start serving in there. Start serving and ask God, show me where you want to work with me. Let me have you bow your heads as we finish today. Some of you would not call yourself a follower of Jesus. And that's great. This is a place where you can explore Christianity. The reason I follow him, why I will give my life for him, is because he served me 2,000 years ago. He served us all. He said, I came to give my life as a ransom for many. That's what he had come to do. The Bible says that God is the king on his throne is pure and holy and beautiful. He is a God of pure love, and the only way to be with him is to be like him. I mean, if he's holy and we're not, then we can't be in his presence because we'll mess everything up. And so Jesus came to die for all the unloving things we have ever brought into this world. That's what he was here for. He voluntarily laid down his life on the cross to pay in full for everything we've done that's wrong. And if you will let Jesus, he will serve you today. He will completely forgive you. He will put you in his family. He will begin to put you in the middle of an adventure. And if you want this life with him, with your head bowed and your eyes closed, say something like this: Jesus, I'm turning to you today. I'm asking you to serve me. I believe you died on that cross for me. Please forgive me. Make your home inside of me and show me what you have for me next. In Jesus' name, amen. As we finish up today, can I ask you all to take your little card out of your program? Even if you're a regular attender, we ask you to do this every week. Would you just take a moment, put your name down? If you're a regular attender, you don't have to give us all the information. But some of you just prayed and you asked Jesus to forgive you. Check that box. Let us know what you've done. Or you recommitted your life to him. Let us know. If there is a prayer request that you have, put it on there and then we'll pray for you. If there's some area where you want to get involved in serving, you can write that down. You can sign up to be a greeter. You can sign up to help with the kids ministry. You can sign up to be on our prayer team. You can sign up to bring goodies and treats or just bring them. And then put that on there and then drop it in one of the 2 offering boxes back on the back walls where you came in. Thanks for coming. Hope to see you again next time.